Over the last year or so, the world has heard a great deal about Greenland. In that same period, the world has heard remarkably little from actual Greenlanders. This special episode of The Foreign Desk is an attempt to rectify that somewhat. It was recorded in Nuuk, Greenland's tiny but delightful capital, during an extremely strange week in Greenlandic history. As we arrived, local authorities were issuing stern advice on preparedness, and here, more than in most places, that is an indication of genuine concern, as Greenlanders are obliged by their climate and environment to be perpetually prepared for pretty much anything anyway. Local people were having serious conversations about what to do in the event of invasion by the United States. Small but symbolic contingents of Danish and other NATO troops were being hastily deployed. Greenland, 57,000 people living on an island roughly 3 times the size of Texas, was at the centre of a diplomatic crisis as dangerous as it was absurd and unnecessary, and it was absolutely absurd and unnecessary. US President Donald Trump was insisting upon America's acquisition of Greenland as a strategic imperative necessary for the defense of the Western world, while the Western world kept trying to explain to Trump that Greenland's role in the defense of same could be readily facilitated under present arrangements. There already is one US base on Greenland, and there could be, and at various points have been, many more. The sundering of NATO and every grim repercussion that might ensue was being risked over nothing at all. And then it was over. Well, maybe. Allowance, as always, must be made for President Trump's whiplash-inducing changes of mind, and for the possibility that by the time you listen to this, the 82nd Airborne are storming the gates of Legoland. But speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos on Wednesday, Trump ruled out seizing Greenland by force and subsequently seemed more or less resigned to something more or less resembling the status quo. For the people of Greenland, it has been a bemusing and alarming experience, and likely a transformative one. As one Greenlandic politician told us, nothing can be the same after this. What has it been like at the eye of this bizarre storm? Has it accelerated or slowed Greenland's drive for independence from Denmark? And can Greenland ever trust the United States again? This is The Foreign Desk.
It is anger. It's a completely new anger towards the American president.
It shouldn't be Denmark, it shouldn't be EU, it shouldn't be US that should decide what should happen here in Greenland. It should be completely up to us.
The US is an ally now, has been, and will be in the future.
You're listening to The Foreign Desk with me, Andrew Muller. Our first guest is Avrak Olsen, Mayor of Sermersooq Municipality, which includes not only Greenland's capital of Nuuk, but a chunk of southern and eastern Greenland nearly the size of France, with a total population of about 24,000 people, many only accessible by boat, light aircraft or helicopter. We met Mayor Olsen at her office in Nuuk, and I began by asking how worried her constituents had been this last year, and especially this week.
It's been a roller coaster ride, to say it mildly. I think it started with few people actually worried. Like if you asked me for 10 days ago, very few people were actually anxious. And most people talked about it, but kept on with their daily lives. Mm-hmm. But it's the opposite now. Everybody worries, have concerns, even children, and especially the elder population. Now Trump just said in his speech that he won't be using force. I think that gives people time to breathe up. But as I heard him, we still have some things to be concerned about. So people are still there.
But have you, in your job, got concerned to the point where you've had to start having conversations about, should we actually prepare for this? What do we actually do?
Well, the first thing we've done is also making sure that people doesn't feel alone. Make sure that we all have the tools to talk to each other in the right way? How do you talk to your children about what you see on social medias? How do you talk to elders? We live in a society where we are very much on social medias, but the social media is in English, which is our third language. So we have a great part of the population who doesn't speak or understand English as fluently as I do, for example. So when you see images and maybe not understand the full context of it, you start to imagine very bad things. So that's why we also had to try to give people tools to how to talk about the things that you see. Not many are prepared to things as fake news or AI.
Are you noticing as well among local people here much, I guess, actual anger at what is going on, and especially about how President Trump has spoken about Greenland, and even because I think it was about maybe this time last year that Donald Trump Jr. and the late Charlie Kirk actually came to Nuuk.
Yeah, it is anger. It's a completely new anger towards the American president and the policy he's going with. When it was announced last year that J.D. Vance was coming to Nuuk, some organized a demonstration, which turned out to be, at the time, the largest demonstration we ever had in Greenland. And that actually turned out to be something that I can guess, that kept J.D. Vance from Nuuk. He didn't come to Nuuk because everybody was turning him down. So instead, he went to Pituffik Space Base. And we thought that, okay, we already made the statement, that must be enough. But the anger has increased again after Trump.
So I'm guessing Donald Jr. and Charlie Kirk didn't impress anybody when they were here?
Not at all. The opposite.
Is it true they were literally handing out money to people in the street?
They were handing out money on the street, and they even handed out money to very young teenagers and had them saying things pro-America on screen to use in social medias. And that's why we also made guidelines for journalists. As the municipality, it's our job to also protect our kindergartens and our schools. We had reporters, but also influencers pro-Trump coming to Nuuk, and they just walked into classrooms and wanted to film children and talk to them about this. And they did hand out $100 bills on the street, and that made people very angry.
I would think. I do want to talk about perhaps a happier parallel universe in which none of this is happening, because this is probably not something you anticipated having to deal with when you became mayor in 2022. If all this wasn't happening, what kind of things would you rather be working on?
Well, we would be working on more housing, better schools, more jobs outside of Nuuk, all the other regular problems that you try to solve in any other municipality in the world.
Is there any sense at all in which this has been an opportunity? Because obviously enormous global attention very suddenly focused on Greenland.
Yeah, and I've said that from the beginning. He may cause us problems. I said that before this escalated, but there's no doubt that we have more attention now, and it's positive attention. The tourism was already growing in Greenland, and especially Nuuk. It will be even better, I think. And just now with all the reporters in town, I think what is very positive about this is also that we have very new and fresh eyes on us now, and the world wants to learn about us and learn from us, hear our opinions, and not just talk about us in a way they think we are. And that's very new to us.
Are there any concerns that too much of that, or allowing too much of that, will change this country from being what it is? Because it is a product of its remoteness in many respects.
Well, we have been working on our tourism strategy and policy for a while. And what we have decided to focus on is that every concrete thing that we will be doing towards tourism will be firstly to the benefits of the inhabitants. So if we want to make a path, a hiking path, it will be firstly for the inhabitants and next for the tourists. If we want a new hotel, what can it give to the town? Like we will demand like a restaurant that is open for everyone, and the hotel won't be someplace in the town where we don't want it to be. So it's very much on us first and then the tourists.
And just as a final thought for listeners who may be tempted themselves to come and take a look at Nuuk and the surrounding municipality, as the mayor, how would you sum up the municipal character? What are the people here like? Is there a typical Nuukian?
Yeah, the ones who are here are those who also dream big, and you have space to dream big here in Nuuk, but you're also outgoing. We Greenlanders, we say we are friendly people, and I do think we are. But I think that here in Nuuk, we welcome tourism a lot, but on our terms. And yeah, we do welcome people to come and visit us or stay with us. We just really appreciate it when you take the time to know a little about the country before you get here. Try some few Greenlandic phrases and don't expect that everything is like back home, and then you will be feeling very welcomed.
That was Avarak Olsen, Mayor of Sermersooq Municipality. You're listening to The Foreign Desk. This is The Foreign Desk with me, Andrew Muller. Greenland has its own parliament, and we will hear from a couple of its members later in the show, but also returned two MPs to the Folketing, the Parliament of Denmark. One of those is Aya Kemnitz of the Greenlandic party Inuit Ataqatigiit. She joined us at Monocle Radio's pop-up studio in the atrium of Katuak, the Greenland Cultural Centre in Nuuk. I began by asking her to explain her role and how it differed from being a Greenlandic MP in Greenland or a Danish MP in Denmark.
I think it's a very central role because, of course, I need to be aware about the cultural sensitivity between Greenland and Denmark. I need to speak both to a Greenlandic audience and a Danish audience at the same time. And it makes it more difficult, you can say. But we've been able to get, for example, results for 32 billion Danish kroners just last year. So it really shows that when it comes to defense, when it comes to preparedness, when it comes to different other areas, we play a quite important role. But also when we talk about business development and development of the Greenlandic society as a whole.
How has the role changed, though, in the last year since President Trump was returned to office and started making 51st state variety noises about Greenland?
I would say, besides being busy, it really hasn't changed. So, of course, I've done a lot of interviews, and it's important for me to represent Greenland, but also to make sure that we coordinate with everybody back here, home here in Greenland. But I also see that I can play a role in making sure that Denmark is just putting more effort into Greenland and much more focus on Greenland. So, and we've been able to more than tenfold the results just the last year. So I think that is also due to the attention that Trump has given to Greenland, to be honest.
I mean, I don't want to ask any fate-tempting questions, but is there an argument that whether it's what he intended or not, the last year or so up to this point has actually benefited Greenland in some respects? It has given you more leverage than you might have had.
I think you can say that, but I think it's been quite tragic to see the kind of way that he have done it, the disrespect towards the Greenlandic people, and just the fact that you think you can buy, the Greenlandic people and the Greenlandic society is just really sad to see. So, of course, it's giving us the kind of attention that we needed in order to make sure that we could get political results as well. Greenland has been open for business for a long time. We haven't seen anything. So I think that's the paradox that we're actually seeing, that, back in 2019, I was also representing Greenland in the Danish parliament. And really nothing happened from the US side.
You mentioned there, or you allude to there, the relationship between Greenland and Denmark, which obviously has a considerable history and not always a happy one. Do you think, though, that has changed in the last year? Has it drawn Greenland and Denmark closer together? We did hear that statement, of course, from Greenland's Prime Minister saying that if Greenlanders were given a choice between Denmark and the United States, then they would choose to remain part of the Kingdom of Denmark.
I think on a short term. And I think after the last election here in Greenland, of course, you could see a much more realistic approach to independence. This is a long-term goal for many of us in Greenland, but I think putting the realism into the conversation has been so important. Focusing not only on political independence, but also focusing on economic independence. And if you're looking at those two things that are, interlinked to each other, that's the way I see it. It's a different conversation that we're having. So I think the kind of quick fix towards a quick independence is something that will leave us much more vulnerable. And I think that's the reason why we're actually here.
I mean, are you concerned, though, that even if, for example, President Trump abruptly lost interest in this whole thing tomorrow, and he does abruptly lose interest in things from time to time, that the pressure and the attention focused on Greenland the last year will have changed Greenland in some respect permanently?
Yeah. What we should focus on is the fact that we've been fighting for our rights for many years, for decades, and we'll keep fighting. So the Greenlandic people are quite resilient. Every kind of right that we have is something that our ancestors has been fighting for. And therefore, we'll keep fighting in order to make sure that the future of Greenland should be completely up to us. And it shouldn't be anybody else. It shouldn't be Denmark. It shouldn't be EU. It shouldn't be other countries, or it shouldn't be US that should decide what should happen here in Greenland. It should be completely up to us.
But is there, do you think, or have you got the sense there's any difference between politicians here in Greenland and people here in Greenland and politicians in Denmark about how this crisis should be managed? Have there been tensions over the approach to take to the United States?
No, I really haven't seen anything. But what is important to understand is, Greenland and Denmark couldn't be further apart in the way that we speak, in the way we have our culture, in the way that we live our lives in many ways. And, many people in Denmark don't necessarily know a lot about Greenland. For example, it's just recently that you were obliged to know something about Greenland in the public schools of Denmark. So, of course, there's a long history of Greenland and Denmark staying together, and also families that are infiltrated into each other. But we also see a lack of knowledge. We also see a lack of interest, to be honest, to some extent. We also see these historic cases that is affecting everything also currently and the current life that we have here in Greenland. So, of course, there's issue that needs to be addressed, but I think it should be addressed behind closed doors, and we should find solution. We should get up to speed, whether it's defense, whether it's the historic cases, whether it's a violation of human rights, for example, in Greenland, and so on. This is something that Greenland and Denmark should talk about with each other and then stand strong together on the outside.
But on that subject of defence, it has been pointed out more than once that under the current arrangements, the United States can build pretty much what it likes in terms of defence installations on Greenland. This goes back to the 1951 agreement, subject to a few subsequent updates. But even if President Trump climbed back down to that status quo, would people here in Greenland perhaps feel more nervous about US military installations than they might have done a year ago?
I think it depends on whether it's more American military personnel, for example, in Pituffik Space Base, or whether it's American personnel here in Nuuk. And I think especially, what Trump is doing right now, every time he's speaking up, he's just pushing the Greenlanders further away. That's the way I see it. So the situation right now is, we're further away from US, if you ask me. And in the last year, especially the last year, but also since 2019, we have been open for business. We have been open for discussion. We have been open for dialogue on different various issues, whether it's business development, defense, and so on. So the hindrance, it's kind of like, US is kicking up an open door, but they haven't really done anything when it comes to those issues. So Of course, Denmark should do more when it comes to strengthening the defense in Greenland. I've been pushing for that.
You'd like to see more Danish military investment in Greenland?
Yes, and in collaboration with, of course, the Greenlandic government as well. The Arctic Basic Education is my idea. It's the greatest success that we actually have when it comes to defense in Greenland. And I think just the fact that you can speak Greenlandic, that you've been, growing up around this area in nature, and the fact that you've been, sailing as a kid and your whole life, those are very good competencies in order to make sure that you can defend your own country, but also that you can defend, the sovereignty in the Arctic area. So I think we're the experts of every day, and I think it's really important to make sure that defense interest, but also the Greenlandic people's interest are integrated into each other when we talk about defense here. So we need to think differently. And we also need to think about, new technology, drones, satellites. I think that's important because even if you were to take a whole bunch of defense people and military people to come here, it's the world's biggest island. It's a huge area to cover, whether it's search and rescue, whether it's defending. And I think defending is quite important to focus on, because everything that we have decided as politicians is with a focus on being, the defense in Greenland. It's not an offensive or a way of looking at defense here in Greenland. So I think the approach has been good. And I think in many ways the US has their own narrative. They want Greenland and they're not really listening to the facts. That we're actually trying to make this work, and that we could actually have a discussion on how we could do it better in the future.
That was Aya Kemnitz, Greenlandic member of the Folketing. This is the Foreign Desk. This is a special Greenlandic edition of the Foreign Desk on Monocle Radio. Most of the parties represented in Greenland's parliament, the Inatsisartut, notionally favour Greenland's independence from the Kingdom of Denmark. Some, however, want it sooner than others, and the party least willing to wait is Nalaraq, presently in opposition. Nalaraq is led by Pille Broberg, who has previously served as Greenland's business, finance and/or foreign minister. We met him at Nalaraq's offices in the Parliament building in Nuuk. I began by asking what it's like turning on the news every day and listening to Earth's most powerful individual talking about taking over your country.
Well, I think since he first was in office, that obsession with Greenland does not come just from the president. It's because of our location. So it makes sense that we attract some wanted and unwanted attention from time to time. It is a bizarre situation for us because everybody's talking about us, not with us. At some point, I think we'll get back to normalcy. I hope, at least, because we don't want to be Americans. We don't want to be Danish. We want to be Greenlandic. Even the Danes are having a little bit difficult time with realizing that we don't want to be Danish either. But again, that's what all the political parties signed.
But on that subject about people talking about you and not talking to you, and I can understand that must be infuriating, but you have suggested direct talks between the United States and Greenland. But when you talk about that, who do you envisage talking to who? Is there anybody from Greenland who can speak for Greenland at that level? Because Denmark still handles your foreign policy and defense.
No, they don't. We are recognized as a people. We can have talks with anybody. We can even sign agreements on behalf of the Kingdom of Denmark when it's only with regards to Greenland. But we are not foreign policy. Us talking to the US is not foreign policy for Denmark. That's us figuring out our future. So the narrative that Denmark is trying to use, they have always used to keep us away from power. I've met with my Icelandic counterpart when I was foreign minister. The Danes weren't in the room. Why should they? It's only when we talk about the US, they all of a sudden say, oh, this is whatever.
So do you think there could or should be direct talks between, say, the Prime Minister of Greenland and the President of the United States, or the Foreign Minister of Greenland and the Secretary of State?
Of course, I've already had Blinken here when I was foreign minister. The Danes tried to invite themselves to that meeting, but the ones greeting the Secretary of State at his plane, I arranged that was only my Prime Minister. So, of course, It's a Danish narrative that they're the center of the world. Unfortunately, we are not in their little world. We are living in the Arctic, not the North European continent.
I know your party, Nalaraq, I know most Greenlandic parties are keen on independence, as are most Greenlandic people. But,
well, they claim to be, yes.
But Nalaraq, I think we can say, is more keen than most. Do you worry at all that the last year or so may have made that a less realisable ambition? Has it sort of inculcated a sense of vulnerability among Greenlanders, that they start to worry that if we're not part of the Kingdom of Denmark, then we're completely unprotected? You're shaking your head?
Yeah, no, because Denmark is not protecting us today. Denmark and the U.S. made a defense agreement about the defense of Greenland in 1951. Mm-hmm. However else you want to look at it, Denmark gave up within 6 hours during World War II when the Germans occupied them. Who defended Greenland back then? The U.S. So if you look back at history, Denmark has never defended Greenland. It has always been the umbrella of the U.S. that has protected us. So most people right now are looking at this bizarre situation. And unfortunately, what we notice is that it also works as kind of as a dog whistle for Danish racism to be justified and called...
In what kind of way?
Well, for instance, some of our members of parliament are being called traitors by, for instance, Aya Kenneth Larsen in Denmark, the Inuit Ataqatigiit member of the Danish parliament. The government claimed that our party traveled back and forth to the U.S. and having a lot of trips paid for and stuff like that. None of it true. But they feel justified right now to use this situation to try to shame independence movements. They try to use that as a dog whistle to say it's okay for us that wants to stay Danish to kind of belittle and shame the independence movement.
But are you worried, though, that the last year and President Trump's rhetoric about Greenland has actually ruptured that relationship between Greenland and the United States, that from here on Greenlandic people won't be able to think of the United States as a protector, that you'll be, whatever happens, forever worried that the United States might turn predator?
History will tell. I can't speak for the Greenlandic people. I can only say what all political parties have made in our joint statement. The U.S. is an ally now, has been, and will be in the future. So if that should change, that will change. But right now, that hasn't changed yet.
But if President Trump was to calm down about this and climb down from this and say, actually, on further reflection, the 1951 agreement does give us all we want, and therefore the United States will now start building considerable facilities all over Greenland, would Greenlandic people be as relaxed about that now as they might have been a couple of years ago?
Yes, we have said that for a lot of years. We don't mind the American military presence in Greenland because they don't build their military presence up in our cities. They do that outside our cities. It's only the Danes that do their annexation, intimidation in our cities. United Nations Declaration regarding Indigenous Peoples required Denmark to demilitarize, to make sure our youth is not called into the Danish army or navy or whatever you want to call it. But they do. Nobody is looking at that. So the worry we have is twofold. One, we're trying to get away from the Danish annexation. We're not trying to get into a new one. And if you look at the 1951 defense agreement, it doesn't give the U.S. what it wants. And you saw the escalation the previous week when the Danes invited NATO members, not NATO, to station troops in Greenland. Because I say it that way because the U.S. then escalated with tariffs because they saw that as an escalation. Why don't they do it through NATO? Why do they invite 8, 7, how many other nations there are in that small coalition of what they think is important to send troops up here instead of doing it through NATO? Well, it shows why the 1951 agreement doesn't work. The U.S. does not have exclusivity militarily to Greenland, which means if Denmark is annexed tomorrow by Russia, Russia would have access to Greenland. Well, that's what we saw during World War II. So no, the 1951 agreement does not give the U.S. what they want with regards to security. It just gives them access, just like it gives everybody access that Denmark wants to give them access to.
So you don't regard, presumably, those recent deployments of Danish and other troops as any kind of reassurance?
No. I mentioned we had a meeting with all the political leaders. I said that's an escalation. It won't be viewed as anything else, and I was right, unfortunately. So right now, Denmark is playing a dangerous game with NATO, claiming this is an attack on another NATO country. NATO is not built for political conflict of this magnitude. NATO is a defense alliance against external threats. So when they try to drag NATO into it, well, then you put the alliance at risk instead of de-escalating it.
So what would strike you as a sensible path forward for Greenland from this point? Obviously, if we pin that to that equation you were drawing up, you don't want to be Danish and you don't want to be Americans, you want to be Greenlanders, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to want. But what is the clearest path to that from where we are?
Well, I've said that since 2018 when I ran the first time. We have the right to self-determination, and one of the tools we have available is free association. And I have argued that we should have a free association with Denmark, where we keep up basically the normal relations we have today, except they don't own us. They don't decide anything for us. And then we'll have a defense agreement with the US about the defense of Greenland.
That was Pille Broberg, chair of Greenlandic opposition party Nalaraq. You're listening to The Foreign Desk. This is The Foreign Desk with me, Andrew Muller. Our final guest in this special edition recorded in Nuuk is Naja Nathanielsen, Greenland's Minister of Business, Mineral Resources, Energy, Justice and Gender Equality, and an MP with the Inuit Ataqatigiit Party. We met the minister at her office in Nuuk, and I began by asking her to try to encapsulate just how weird the last week had been.
I think bewilderment is really the word that catches it the best. It's been really strange, and we've been trying to figure out the big question why since it all broke out.
Have you arrived at any answer to that?
Not really, no, because I still think that we ended up a place that is pretty similar to where we started. So I don't really see the cause for all this really trauma that has been created amongst the people of Greenland. It's been a wild week, and people have been generally concerned. And for me, of course, I've been having stuff to do, so I've been keeping myself busy. But for many people, this has been really filling every moment of every day.
We'll get on to topics related to your portfolio shortly, but just in terms of what you've heard from your own voters, your own constituents, I mean, how worried have they been?
Generally worried. People are worried. People are concerned. People are afraid. This is not only an ally, but a very, very big country that has threatened us with occupation, really, because, of course, Greenlanders has been saying quite consistently, please no, we do not want to be American. And even then, this has not been taken in, and threats have continued. And I think this has really scared people, because we are such a small country, and we are fully aware that the NATO alliance exists partly due to the great contribution from the states. And if NATO was to falter, then the whole world order would really see dramatically different, have a dramatically different profile, all because of us. And we have realized this. So both this thing about being the center of the world's attention, being an epicenter for a changing world order, just like January last year, but also just being afraid of your own household, your own family, your friends, your livelihood, all of that, all in once.
I mean, we're speaking on Friday afternoon in Nuuk, and at the risk of tempting fate, the immediate threat seems to have dissipated. But if the United States has backed off and has abandoned the idea of acquiring Greenland, do you worry that this last week and this last year will have changed Greenland permanently?
I think I really, really believe deep down that the world has changed. We said this last year. The world order has changed, and I think the world has to get on board with it. The Prime Minister of Canada spoke quite clearly when he said it's not a rift, it's a rupture. Things have already changed, and we have to find a footing in it. Everyone. And I think there is a lot of wishful thinking in many countries, a pining for the past, but this is behind us, and we now have to figure out how do we position ourselves? What kind of values do we want to take on into this new world? What kind of international profile do we want in this changing world?
I mean, one of the reasons that has been advanced by President Trump and by the United States for their interest in Greenland is, of course, its mineral resources. Does anyone actually know, though, what is there? Has anyone been able to quantify how mineral-rich Greenland is?
Well, Greenland is very mineral-rich. We have a lot of untapped resources still. We know they're there, but they haven't been mined to any great extent yet. So we are what you call a greenfield country. So any mining in Greenland will be very long-term, very high risk, very capital intensive. That is the framework we are working within. For us, it's a success if we 5-10 years from now will have a stable, maybe 2, 3, 5 stable mines in operation. But that's the scheme of it. We're never going to be a very, very big mining country.
And all of that will require considerable outside investment, and I'm sure the United States would be the likeliest source of that. But has the last year or so made Greenlanders, do you think, less inclined to trust the United States entirely again?
Well, actually, our main source of investments come from Europe, from the UK, from Australia. Canada is great investors into the Greenlandic mining sector. So not a lot of American investment so far. Of course, we have been hoping to see it, but we're not there yet. I think when it comes to harvesting Greenlandic resources, we are quite pragmatic. This is what we've got. We realize fully well we have to harvest our resources in order to survive. This is a fishery stock, that is minerals, that is our energy potentials, and so on. So we're not naive about that. We are pragmatic about that. When it comes to who do you perceive to be your allies, of course, we still look upon the US as an ally, but an ally is not necessarily a great friend. And I think there has to be rebuilt trust. And I think this does not only go for Greenland. I think that goes for a lot of countries in Europe as well.
Do you think, though, that the pressure exerted on Greenland over the last year has, I guess, recalibrated things domestically, certainly in terms of Greenland's aspirations of independence? I mean, you wrote in the New York Times this week on Greenland's position within the Kingdom of Denmark that you're not unhappy with the House, but you would like to alter the interior. In what kind of way?
Well, we've been really moving and pressuring Denmark towards more self-determination for many, many decades. For us, this has never been a sprint. It's a marathon, and we have been building competences all along this time. So for us, independence tomorrow would really be difficult for us to manage. So this has never been on the table. What we are looking for is constantly getting more and more of a say in our also in the areas that are right now under Danish jurisdiction. For instance, foreign policies. We have been working towards getting a bigger say in that. 10 years ago, we were not seated at the table. Today, we are seated at the table. So things are moving forward, and I think it is done in a manner where we build competence as well. So some of us are more, what do you call it, we want it faster, and some are more, they have more patience. And I think you will find that in any country that on some issues people are different in their profile and patience level. So that's the same in Greenland. We will have people saying we want it now, and others saying, well, we are comfortable waiting a bit.
I mean, as we speak, Denmark's Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, is due to arrive in Greenland today, I believe. I mean, it may seem a bit idle to try and look at the bright sides of the last year or so, but do you feel like Greenland maybe now has more leverage in that relationship than it did before you drifted into the focus of President Trump?
If you look at, I always tend to look at the bigger picture. I always take a step back and look on the broader picture. You know, if you only look at the last week, you cannot conclude anything from a week. You can conclude something from the bigger timelines. And I can just say that it has been true that every time since the colonization, there has been a crisis of some sort. We have moved forward with getting more maneuver room. So, of course, this will happen as well. And we have seen that the past year. So some discussions become easier when there is a crisis or there is some sort of push. You have to go back to just the 1700s. It was the same thing. It was the same thing in the 1800s and in the 1900s and so on. So there has always been progression, but it has always followed because of some sort of change in the narrative, the discussions in Greenland or even internationally.
Just finally then, and this is the fun part where I ask you to try and think ahead into the future. We won't hold it against you, but how would you like 5-10 years from now, let's say 5 years from now, how would you like to be able to look back on this week and what it might have meant for Greenland?
Hopefully, I will look back on it as a week that meant nothing in the bigger picture. This should not be the defining week of our future. It should be all the work we're doing all the other days of the year. Our commitment to educating, heightened educational level, bettering the welfare of Greenlanders, collaborating with partners such as the European Union, UK, Australia, Canada, the US, and that should be the defining moments, not this week of craziness.
That was Naja Nathanielsen, Greenland's Minister of Business, Mineral Resources, Energy, Justice and Gender Equality. That's it for this special edition of The Foreign Desk, recorded in Nuuk. We'll be back next week, and look out for the Foreign Desk Explainer, available every Wednesday. The Foreign Desk was produced by Lily Austin and Anita Riota. This week's Foreign Desk Explainer was produced by Christy O'Grady. To contact the Foreign Desk team, you can email Anita at aer@monocle.com, and don't forget to subscribe to Monocle magazine and our free daily email bulletins by heading to our website at monocle.com. From me, Andrew Muller in Nuuk, thanks very much for listening. Until next time, goodbye.